Hi, folks. This is Mr. MegaManFan. Like, share, comment, subscribe. You know all the things to do. It's time for a 7800 game drive update because Saint has released new firmware for it, and I also have the Mega 7800 adapter, which I purchased through Atari Age. So, combining the two together, there are some new things that we can do. The first of which is to disable game breaks because there are a few 7800 ROMs that aren't compatible with the game breaks that you can normally use on the Mega Drive. So, PacMan Collection, the original version released by PacMan Plus being one of them. So, if you disable the game breaks, then you don't get any weird issues like the screen jumping around whenever certain sound effects are played. And this gameplay footage should suffice to show that it now works correctly with the game breaks disabled. So it's a little bit like the Terra Onion Super SD Super HD System 3. If you have any games where in-game breaks are causing issues, just go ahead and disable them before you launch the game, and then those issues will go away. But if you're not having issues, you can leave them on, and then you can access some extra features that are really fun. One of the features that now works now that I have the Mega 7800 adapter is hitting start on a Sega Genesis controller brings up the game break menu. And in that game break menu, you have save states, loading save states. You can turn on or off cheats as you see fit, or you can exit back to the main menu. There are two things you should keep in mind about this though. First of all, when you've been running 7800 ROMs, you cannot switch over to 2600 ROMs without resetting your console. The second thing you need to know is when you're running 2600 ROMs, you're not going to be able to use game breaks. That just doesn't exist in 2600 mode. Maybe it can in a future firmware update, but as of right now, presume that you're basically not going to be able to access those features if you're on a 2600 ROM. And also, you may need to use the game select keys to start a game, such as with Space Invaders. I actually needed to hit reset on the console itself because none of the buttons on the Genesis controller or any other controller plugged in would start the game. Only hitting reset on the console would actually start a game of 2600 Space Invaders. But I am happy to say that Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man on the PacMan Collection both work as expected now that I'm able to disable game breaks using the Mega 7800 and the latest firmware. Saint has done a really good job at Retro HQ with making these products, and I want to commend him again for that because playing ROMs on a simple cartridge like this, just load the ROMs on a micro SD card, plug them in the cartridge, plug the cartridge into your console. That alone would have been enough without the game breaks and the save states, so everything else is icing on the cake as far as I'm concerned. This has now become quintessentially the easiest and most flexible of 7800 ROM loaders that I've ever had. There are other options. I'll show them all off in a future video. I'm going to do a comparison between the Color Cart 2, the Dragonfly, and the Mega Drive and talk about the pros and cons of each one. But for now, we're focusing on the Mega Drive since it's the newest, the latest, and could arguably be the greatest because it seems to have the most compatibility with all different kinds of Atari 7800 and 2600 ROMs, regardless of which kind of mappers or what kind of bank switching they use. It seems to be able to flex with all of that with little to no problem. Well, I've talked about those features, but now you'd probably like to see those features, wouldn't you? Well, good news. I'm just about to reach a point in Ms. Pac-Man where I'm ready to stop. I wanted to get an extra life, and I did that, so I'll run into the ghost monster, and we can move on. I'm going back to the menu, and I'm going to select Astro Fighter for Atari 7800, another homebrew from Bob, aka PacMan Plus. This time I have game breaks enabled, so we can actually see what they do in the game itself. This is another one of Bob's excellent arcade conversions that used to be available in a physical form, but now exists as a ROM only for various reasons. If you want to know more about those reasons, visit the AtariAge.com forums and read up about it, but suffice it to say, they're focusing on original games and not arcade conversions in the future if you want physical releases. But now I can hit start, I can save a state to any of these slots, and I can reload that state at any time by hitting start. So essentially, you can do what you would do with an emulator where you can freeze the game at any time and go back to it. And I've never had it scramble it, which sometimes you get with certain save state features on, I don't want to say which products or what emulators. I'm just going to say there can be compatibility issues when, like for example, you take a save state in a Genesis game and you come back and the sound is off or the graphics are scrambled for a little bit. It doesn't always work out right, but I've never noticed it yet not working right when I've done a save state with the Mega Drive. So that's either a credit to Saint's programming skills or a credit to the way the game drive is designed, or arguably both. Here's another of Bob's unique creations. He got Casey Munchkin for the Odyssey 2 working on the Atari 7800. Obviously, it's not emulating its original code, but it looks like it might as well be emulating an Odyssey 2, and it's actually more fun to control it with this Genesis controller than it ever was to control it with an Odyssey 2. Honestly, the thing that keeps me from being more enthusiastic about the Odyssey 2 is that the controllers are hardwired in, and I had one that I tried to set up, but the controller was permanently going to the left no matter what I did with it, and I gave up at that point because I didn't have the technical know-how to fix that, or to replace it, or both. If they had controller ports that you could just unplug and plug things, the Odyssey 2 would be so much better, especially since you could use your own sticks or gamepads instead of the ones that are built in with it, which I just was never a fan of. This is yet another of Bob's arcade conversions called Ripoff, but I'm going to game break out of that one and switch to Super Pac-Man. Is it any wonder that with the nickname Pac-Man Plus on the Atari Age forums that Bob was very enthusiastic about porting Pac-Man games to Atari 7800? I mean, he did things that I would have considered impossible. He got Baby Pac-Man to work on Atari 7800, which you really wouldn't think would work considering half of it is a physical pinball table. But he managed to emulate the look and feel of the pinball and even the feeling of switching between the arcade upper half and the pinball lower half when you go through the tunnels. So, geez, Bob is just, I don't want to gush too much and make him blush, but he's a genius. He really does amazing things when it comes to programming 7800 games, and being able to access them on the fly with the Mega Drive and game breaks is one of the greatest things I can imagine. This to me is like the first time I used an EverDrive on a Super Nintendo or an NES and discovered all the things I could do with Crick's products. The same options, save states, load states, being able to game break and switch games on the fly. That just basically sums it up, doesn't it? The Mega Drive for Atari 7800 is the EverDrive of the Super Nintendo or the NES. Whether it's the EverDrive N8 Pro or the FX Pack Pro, it's the same thing. Mega EverDrive Pro on Sega Genesis, all the things you can do with that, you can do with the Mega Drive 7800. It's the same kind of deal. That flexibility of taking the games you own, putting them on a micro SD card, putting it in the cartridge, putting the cartridge in your console, and, no pun intended, but Bob's your uncle. At that point, you do what you want, the way you want, how you want. It's just fabulous. And I'm going to show you one more thing here. You have to reset the console when you want to play Atari 2600 games. I mentioned this previously, but if you start with a 7800 ROM and then try to go to a 2600 ROM, you're going to get an error message. So reboot your console, then pick your Atari 2600 ROM, and you're good to go. There are so many out there. You'll find some that you definitely want to play, even if the 2600 mode is less powerful than Atari 7800 mode. But the Space Invaders hack from Nuki Shea is one of the ones that I do enjoy playing when I'm playing Atari 2600 games. The 7800 version is better, but the 2600 one is still fun. This is my Mega Drive update. Thanks for watching. I'm Mr. Mega Man Fan. Like, share, comment, subscribe. See y'all later.